Welcome to Reinvention Ready, where you can ignite your fires of possibility and discover how to make the rest of your life your best life. I'm Janie Genosis, and I am so delighted today to introduce you to my guest, Dr. Ali McDermott. Ali has an amazing story to tell. She is an international book publisher, award-winning global leader, international best-selling published author, motivational coach, and she has done some major pivoting to reinvent her life. She used to be a lawyer, has been and still is a college professor, and is also the CEO and founder of Pen Crown Publishing, helping authors share their stories to make an impact and leave their legacy. She is also the CEO and founder of McDermott Leadership, where she helps people define and redefine their purpose to lead the life of their dreams. Ali, welcome to Reinvention Ready. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I'm excited too. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here.
Yeah, and you have a background that blew me away. I mean, you've been a lawyer, you've been a college professor, you still are a college professor. Actually, you're still teaching college kids, and you have a publishing company that you just started less than a year ago. And you have a great story about how all that happened and how you've made some pretty remarkable changes in your life. So let's just start with that if that's good with you.
Of course, of course. I framed last year and the year before really as the most transformative of my life. I've been in so many different careers, and I thought and reflected, last year and the year before about, the meaning of those careers and what I could do. And really, I pivoted because I left a pretty toxic marriage. I was married for more than half my life. So 25 years is a long time. And then when you kind of get an opportunity to show up differently in the world, you take a step back and you examine, okay, what is it that I can do? What is it that I want to be? What's my vision for my beautiful life? At least that's what I did. And so I looked at it more, in the beginning, it was not that way, right? So I'd be remiss if I talked to people and said, hey, in the beginning, it was, sunshine and roses. But once I gained a little bit of perspective, I thought, okay, now is an opportunity for me to show up differently. What is it that I want for myself? What is it? What's my vision here? And because I had done so many different things, I really examined the roles I took at different points in my life, why I took them, how they contributed to who I was, how I showed up in the world. And I was really able to plan out with intention what I wanted to see for myself, right? And how my skills and abilities fit, right? And there were no accidents. It was really fascinating. All of the things I sort of did in my life, I loved, right? And there were reasons for doing them at the time I did them, certainly. But as I looked at the path that I wanted to take, I thought, this is really how I want things to go now for me. This is how I'm going to show up in the world, and I'm going to do it unapologetically now.
I love that. And I love that you say there were no accidents. And I think a lot of people beat themselves up over what's happened in the past or the choices that they made that maybe they look back and wish they hadn't. But that's why they're where they are today. And it's what
Right.
can you do today with the
Right.
time that you have left to, like you said, make my beautiful life. And I love that. I love that. So what did you learn? What were some of the things you learned that you think could help other people?
I think really, planning, right? I think people, when you're confronted with a challenge, an event, something unforeseen or, something that kind of jilts you off your center, a lot of people, even through COVID, lost their jobs, were laid off. And certainly I'm 50 years old, right? And so I thought, oh goodness, what now? Right? Do I look for a corporate job? Do I look for, financial security, stability? Which of my roles really, I could go back and be an attorney. I thought about that a lot because I practiced law for 10 years. But there was a reason I left the practice of law when I did. I thought, okay, do I take more jobs teaching? And that was fulfilling for me. But I left that role for a reason, right? I love retail. Right. That's how I started my life. But there was a reason I left that. Right. And so in examining everything, there's a difference between like fear and anxiety, right? And looking at, when you're sort of mired in sort of the muck of, really fear. I mean, so, kind of getting more personal, um, when everything was upended for me during the year, it was, how can I make money now? How can I support myself? How can I support my kids? Right. And so when, everything sort of seems to be crashing down, you know, I don't think you make great decisions. Right. So you need to take a step back and really look at sort of the big picture, right? Don't just take a short-term opportunity. If you have to, you have to. It depends on people's economics, but really look at what you want for yourself, your vision for your life. And so, I really thought a lot about, what it was that I wanted to do, my path, and really took steps to get there. And again, when we're confronted with, things that seemingly seem unforeseen, right? That's not a great sentence, but challenges, traumas, events, you're laid off, you get demoted, or, things just change. We tend to, or I tend to go, okay, panic sets in,
Mhm.
what do I need to do now? But that's a reaction and not a response. Response requires forethought, intention. And so I think with more planning, more forethought, you can have the life of your dreams with, the ability to just take a step back.
I love talking about response versus reaction. And I
Mhm.
think so many of us, especially when we're in any kind of situation that we're sort of thrown into, not what we had hoped, the first thing is to react. I went through the same thing. I lost a job of 13 years in 2020. And it's like, my self-worth, which shouldn't be surrounded by your job, but in a sense it is. It's like how much money you make, what your title is, all of those things just came crashing down. And it was the second time it happened to me. And so I look back, and fortunately I've always been a self-help junkie and read those kind of books, but I started teaching yoga and started really reading yogic philosophy, which talks a lot about that. And it helps you kind of calm yourself down. And I was able to find a place where I could sit down and say, okay, this has happened to me now twice. Maybe I'm supposed to go a different direction. And this is the universe, God, whatever you want to call this way of pointing me, pushing me, giving me sometimes a swift kick in the butt, a different way, but it was hard. I mean, it's hard not to, and sometimes you have to just cry. And like you say, sometimes you have to take something temporarily. If it's financial, you have to make sure you can keep a roof over your head, and you have kids, feed your kids or your dog, or, you have to do those things, but know that that's not the be all end all.
I
Yeah.
love that you said
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
because, people talk about the universe, religion, or whatever, but redirecting, because I have so many leaders I speak to who say, I've applied to 10 jobs and I'm just not getting them, and they're thinking about starting a consultancy, for example. Well, there's a reason you're not getting a job, right? Maybe your direction is to start your consultancy, right?
Mhm.
And so paying attention to signs like that, I think, is so important too, right? It's just, taking that leap, making, taking a risk is really daunting.
Yeah.
It's but sometimes, the difference between you today and you 3 months from now is whether you have a consultancy, right? So that's the difference.
Right. And going into what you also talked about in on your website was leaving a legacy.
Right. Right.
And it's, as we get older, we're not going to be here forever, and we have a limited amount of time. And a lot of times, you think it's about, oh, having a great job or a great title or a fancy career or a big house. Then you start to realize, no, maybe that's not at all what
Mm.
it's about. And what is that legacy? And so what does that mean to you? I'd love to hear your take on
What's a legacy? So interestingly, for me, it's really what you think about yourself and what you want to leave behind in the world, right? And for everybody, it's a little bit different. And for me, I'm so service oriented. I have three core values: integrity, authenticity, and service. Um, and so, what I would love to be remembered for is really just having an impact on one person. And so, everything I do, even if it's leaving my house, I smile at the neighbor. If I'm at a gas pump, I smile at someone who, is pumping their gas. As a researcher, I know that my smile can change their day. And if it changes their day, they can change, their circle of influence. And the effect is, it's just immeasurable. And so for me, it's just having an impact on one person with my behavior, my attitude, my words, and it's an everyday thing, right? It doesn't have to be these massive, sweeping, huge motions. And I think people think, legacy is such a big, big thing, right? It's a big project. It's a huge undertaking. It can just be a hug, and
it.
literally just be a smile. And so for me, it's an everyday thing,
That's great, because anybody can do that.
right?
We don't have to be Bill Gates,
Right.
and leave some big corporate gift. I mean, a gift can be a smile or a hug or just a kind word sometimes
Right.
to people, being nice to them in line, maybe letting somebody cut in front of you when they only have one item could make their afternoon. Driving, think about how rude some people are when they're driving, and be the
Right.
person to let somebody in, be the person to, not flip somebody off when they
Right.
do.
Right.
Sometimes it's what
Exactly.
we don't do too.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the response and not react, right? Going
Yes.
back to that. Right.
Right,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and another thing I think, when and I know you help leaders and you work with people on a coaching basis too, and
Mhm.
everybody, like, it's like, what's my purpose? What's
Right.
my life
Mhm.
purpose? And I think, kind of along that same line, it's like, maybe there's not this great big purpose. Maybe you're not
Mhm.
supposed to be the guy that climbs the mountain. Maybe you're
Mhm.
the guy that just helps people, and
Mhm.
that can be hard sometimes, I think, for people to go, oh, that doesn't seem important, but it's important to every one of those people that you
Right.
help.
And I think people also don't understand is you can have multiple purposes throughout your life, right? It's not something that people think it's some divine intervention that you're born with, when you come out of the womb. Actually, purposes change throughout people's lives, right? At different moments as well. And it can depend on an environment, an event, things like, different things, and so it literally, like you said, can be something, simple, could be something huge. We don't have to all be, Elon Musk, and I think that's really important for people to understand too.
Yeah, that gives people a lot of hope, I think, too.
Absolutely.
And so I'm curious, in your background and in your past, when you went back to look at things, what
Mhm.
helped you to see that they happen for a reason or a purpose? What, maybe give an example or something that, can kind of help people understand that.
I did so much forensic sort of work, partly because, I was going through a massive divorce, right? And part of it was truly kind of required in a way. We were going through litigation and things like that. But when you're with someone for 25 years, I I was with my ex for more than half my life. And I realized that, I wasn't showing up the way that I wanted to show up, right, in the world. And so in sort of examining how I wanted to show up differently, just, as an individual, and with different identities, which is fascinating too. Age is chronological to me. You are what you believe. And, there were different things that I decided for myself, different mantras as well. How I would tolerate, behaviors, for example, how I knew that I could only control my own behavior, no one else's. There were just certain things that I came to understand, certain things that I researched because I was truly in a state of despair, right? Crying on the bathroom floor. I was tackling an undiagnosed chronic medical condition at the same time. They were testing me for MS, and just like the world was crashing down all at once. And so, in sort of really taking a step back, and as a researcher, I looked at, who am I identity wise as a career woman? Who am I identity wise as a mother? Who am I identity wise eventually, as a romantic partner, right? And how do those kind of fit together? Because I don't believe in duplicity, right? I believe in authenticity. And for a long time, and I published in Fearless Female Leaders, my students at USC had no idea what was happening at home. I would just show up happy and whole and all of that. And so really when I published, it was sort of an apology to them because I preached this idea of authenticity and all this kind of stuff, and they had no idea what was going on at home, right? And so in kind of examining all the identities I had and how could they fit together, and what were my core values and who was I and all that kind of thing, I looked at all the career roles I had, why they made sense at the time I took them, the skills and abilities that I gained from them, and how there were no accidents for me, the growth that I gained from them, and what could they now become and help me become, and the gifts really that they were. And that's why I'm doing what I do now, because and I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Yeah.
that answered it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And as I'm thinking about this, you have this impressive pedigree of education, with your law degree and your it's just things that a lot of people maybe don't have,
Mhm.
but let's talk to those people a little bit, because I think
Sure.
they go, well, she was a lawyer. She's got all this education. She can go be a college, but she's got all these choices. But I just worked at the same place for 30 years in the bookkeeping department. And now my husband's leaving me, or my wife's leaving, or whatever, all of a sudden they find themselves in a situation with less choice, less money, less, how would what would you say to somebody like that, that's dealing with it with less options?
Well, I would say to them, I'm not leveraging, so I'm not a lawyer and I have a law degree. I could
Yeah,
I could be, but
right.
what I'm
Yeah.
doing now is not leveraging my degrees, right? Like
Right.
it's leveraging the skills and abilities that I obtained.
Mhm.
I would also say to them, there are so many opportunities right now for open learning that if you want to pivot to do literally just about anything, you can. I go on the internet, I research every single day because there's something that sparks my interest and I'm like, oh, I want to know more about that, right? And so if you want to do something different, you don't have to pay a bazillion dollars to go do it. There are certificate programs if you want it to lead to something formal, and they're really inexpensive, but you can learn whatever you want out there. So pivoting right now, super
Mhm.
easy. It's just there's so much knowledge. Knowledge is different than information, right?
Mhm.
Information is just facts, but there's so much knowledge out there on the internet for you to absorb. You can literally do anything. So I would say to people, don't stay stuck. If your dream job is to do X, Y, or Z, it's out there for you. Go get it.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that. I love that. And you're right. I forget which, is it Harvard or somebody has free classes. I mean, you don't get a degree, but you could say, I took these classes. And
Right.
I think people, people need to keep seeing those possibilities and not feel, I love that, not feel stuck, and you can pivot. And even like I'm 60, so like, and it's like I keep thinking, oh, I might want to do this or I might want to do that. And sometimes I have to say, well, wait, do I really want to do that because I'm 60, and it's like maybe I do, maybe I don't. Sometimes I honestly I forget that I feel
Exactly.
so much younger, and it's like, well, I have probably 20, hopefully 20, maybe more good years left to do something that I love. And I don't think of like retirement as not doing anything. It's more pivoting to do what you love. And
Right.
yeah, and so it's an interesting way to think about the future, and like you say, that legacy that you want to leave. And it's not too late, no matter how old you are, to do, if something really sparks your interest and sings to your heart, give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? Like you said, 3 months from now, can at least say, well, I tried, and it worked out, or I learned this. So yeah.
And there are so many people as well. I mean, we are so fortunate to live in a global connected community that if you identify something you really want to do, there's someone out there who will mentor you. I mean,
Mhm.
I can bet on it, right? So, go figure out what sort of resources you need, what support you need, send out a message, and I can almost bet on it that someone would be willing to mentor or support you. It's just that's how connected we are now, which, that's, I guess, the beauty of the digital transformation, right?
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, we don't have to do things alone, and it's so much easier now to find. I mean, think about dating, before the internet. What did we do? We had to go to a bar. We had to ask a
Right.
friend, you know anybody? You'd meet somebody from, I mean, there was no, you couldn't go on and say, I'm this and I'm looking for this. And then somebody else on the other end is, I'm this and I'm looking for this. And like, oh, you're a 90% match. I mean, it's like, it's become, and I've been married for 30 plus years. So it's like, I wouldn't, I haven't dated in such a long time, but I have a lot of friends who have really found success and have great new partners because of the internet. And it used to be, if you were too old, but whether they used to say like by the time you were 30 or now probably 40, oh, you're never going to find a mate. But that's not true either. So I think we're shattering all these, and looking at both of us with our long hair
Yeah.
too. And I remember when I was in my 20s, there was a guy named Jose Iber,
Mm,
and his book was called
exactly.
Shake Your Head, Darling. And he
Right.
was on one of the talk shows, and he said, once you're 30 years old, ladies, you should not have long hair. And he's sitting there with a cowboy hat on and
Right.
very long hair of his. I'm like, uh-uh. And I think it's great that we're shattering some of these myths. And, it's like, you don't have to be old. You can choose to be whatever you want to be, no matter how old you are anymore. You get to create yourself.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, the online dating world's different for sure. For sure.
And maybe you have some advice for older folks and people who have been out of it for a long time. What's your experience? Because I know nothing about this.
You know, it's so I obviously being married for more than half my life, I've dipped my toe into online dating, especially because I don't do bars and things like that, right? And because my schedule's so busy, and I have girls at home and things like that, I thought, oh, okay, this will be interesting. It is interesting. Right? There are different platforms that you can join. I'm very data oriented. So, I tried, one platform that seemed to sort of say, we'll match you, and that was not successful. The one platform that I would say has been okay has been a platform called Bumble. And it really drives the idea that women sort of are in charge of the match. And I don't know if you're familiar with Bumble.
That's the one where the woman reaches out, right?
So sort of, but like I, I hope I can explain because I've done it for all of what, 2 weeks. But I
you,
gave
you
my
you know more than me, so
yeah, so I gave myself really an entire year after, my, initial separation to just work on myself, make myself whole, that kind of thing. Because I knew for me, being married for that long, I had a lot of things that I wanted to do for myself. I wasn't about to jump back into a
Mhm.
relationship and stuff like that. So, when the year came around, I'm like, okay, let's see what's going on, right? With Bumble, you create, everyone creates their profile, and then, men, or a partner or whomever, comes in and they like you, and then
Mhm.
you select whether you get matched or not. The women
Okay.
do, which is fascinating to me because sort of the women control the process.
Mhm.
um you know and so I think, for some women that's, attractive, and for me it was.
Mhm.
So that's been an interesting process, um for a couple of reasons. And of course, people know me when, because I've spoken on, podcasts before. I'm incredibly vulnerable. um so there are a lot of connections that I've made, I'll say, where it's, let's just meet right away. And I'm like, no, right? Like, because I have to be very intentional with who I'm bringing into my life, because I
Mhm.
have twins at home.
Yeah.
And, it's not just about a picture and a couple of words, right? And so, there's that sort of element. And then, on the profile, you only get a couple of descriptors, right? Like, very minor. And so for me, it's about making sure there's a connection first, an understanding. So I've not met anybody face to face yet.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm super slow about it. But I know I'm the blocker,
Yeah.
right? And so I haven't quite made the mental and emotional transition yet. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's got, and after 25 years, I mean, I'm sure you learned a lot in your,
Hmm.
I had a marriage that I went through a divorce when I was very young, and I learned so much, and we were married about 3 years, and I knew exactly what I didn't want, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Right.
And so you learn, you just keep growing, and I'm excited for you. Maybe I'll have to have you on again when you're,
Yeah.
more experienced with that, and we can talk about that.
Yes. I think I'd be more successful on probably like a show or something, because I don't know if I'll be able to make the transition. We'll see. I don't know.
You have a lot to offer, and you just have to
Thank
find
you.
the person who has a lot to offer you. It has to go both ways. So,
Thank you.
yeah. And I wanted to talk too, we
Sure.
didn't, you brought it up briefly. You've been through a lot medically.
Hmm.
And I know as people get older, they start to deal with things that are difficult to change or maybe not changeable. And can you share a little bit? You don't have to go into deep details about your medical situations, but maybe what you've learned from that, how you have changed that from reaction to response as you deal with it in your life.
For sure, for sure. So that is a challenge, because as we do get older, right, things do change in our bodies. And one of the things I decided to do was get my certificate in integrative health and nutrition, because I realized there was a huge mind body connection. And it sounds a lot like, with you sort of focusing on yoga and,
Mhm.
mindfulness and stuff like that too. But I realized through research, much of my research, wow, cortisol, plays a role. And there's a lot of things that can happen to your body. And a lot of things were happening to me during those couple of years that just didn't seem right. So I'm like, if I'm going to dig that much into this, I'm going to get a certificate in it. Right. And it was a great, great thing to have. But like I said, they were testing me for things like, MS. I was stuttering, couldn't use my hands and feet, memory loss, that kind of thing. But, in sort of partnering with different physicians, you have a physician for like every organ, understanding sort of, pharmaceuticals versus, holistic medicine. And I've tried it all. there is, a place for both in my life.
Mhm.
People have to make choices for themselves, but there is, a huge, for me, need with respect to nutrition and diet. I'm completely gluten free.
Mhm.
And so I have to watch, and want to watch, what I'm putting in my body. Because that has a huge impact, of course, for me. And so I started to really look at, different things like that. And I think there's opportunities for people, as we age, to look at, nutrition, diet, health. But
Mhm.
like, but it's not just, what we eat, it's, how we take care of ourselves, self-care. One of the things that is just so challenging for me is sleep. I know if I can nail sleep, life will be so much better. But people are talking about like the importance of meditation and the different sort of things, as you look at your day, your stress levels, getting outside for 10 minutes,
Mhm.
standing up from your desk, walking away when something stressful happens. I do a ton of research on something called oxytocin because that's a huge hormone, and it makes you happy, right?
Mhm.
And so I wanted to know, how can I make myself happy? I wasn't happy for 25 years. So how can I make myself happy holistically, right? So dancing, petting a dog, watching a video, eating dark chocolate. So, right? And so, really understanding the kinds of things you can do to help yourself. And so, it's not just run to a doctor if something happens,
Mhm.
it's looking at the things in your life that you have control over that you can change that don't cost anything,
Mhm.
right? You don't have to invest, massive amounts of money. There are, habits you can change and quick things, you can do to make things better. And they're kind of fun. Like, who doesn't want to have a piece of dark chocolate? Who doesn't want to pet a dog, right?
Mhm.
So,
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I've had my own set of health issues, and I have to say there's a place for Western medicine. There's also a place for herbs. There's a place for
mhm,
Eastern philosophy, like meditation. And that's if you can find the best of that combination for yourself and learn. I think it's so important for people. There's a lot of stuff out there on the internet, so you have to be very
right,
careful, I think, not to be like some people will read something and automatically think, oh my gosh, I have a brain tumor, or I have a,
right.
you have to be very careful about where you're getting your information from, and get it from, see if there's different sources. I like to go and actually read medical studies when I have
Yes,
issues and see, okay, what's going on with this particular problem that I have, and what kind of studies have been out there, and what are people, because there's a lot of things within those studies where they'll use food, or they'll use behavioral changes or things like that, and we have so much control over that. And if something doesn't feel right, I would say with a doctor, get a second opinion, do a little more
absolutely.
research. I've struggled with that. I've doctors that I really listened to, and I have doctors that gave me some advice that I didn't think was right for me. And,
Right.
I'm glad I went and did some research and didn't pursue what they wanted me to do. So, there's a whole, we could probably do a whole show on
For sure.
pharmaceuticals, and, the whole making money with medicine. I mean, I think it'd be very different if all of medicine was nonprofit, and
Right.
maybe people could make enough money to live comfortably, and but some of these pharmaceutical companies are just throwing stuff at us we don't need, and that
Hmm.
isn't necessarily going to be good for us in the long term.
Right.
Or there's ways we can do it with diet, nutrition, meditation. We don't need drugs necessarily. So,
Right. Great
but they're also
points.
godsends, and they save us, and they
Right.
keep us from dying sometimes. So it's like it's tough. I'm not a doctor. But I always tell people, nobody knows your body better than you.
Exactly. I love that you said that,
Yeah.
really. Right. And you have, for me, I have instinct too. When
Mhm.
I've gone to, I have a broken back, right? And when I say that, people go, ah, but I literally have a crack in my back. And
Mhm.
I went to two neurosurgeons, And the second one said, we can't fix it, right? We can do this, that, and this. And so I sort of live with it because I don't want to do this, that, or this. It doesn't make sense to me. And so, we'll see what happens with that. But there are literally things in in kind of every organ, that have to be sort of managed. But instead of waking up every day, looking in the mirror and saying, it's too much, I say, you know what? I'm going to stay in my lane. They got this. I'm good, right? It's not my bailiwick. I don't have an MD, and I'm not going to let it impact me, right? And so I think it's really important for people to maintain a positive mindset no matter what's happening medically, because, I can get bad medical news kind of on a daily if I let it happen, right? But why, right? I'm leading a beautiful life. I'm joyful. I have my mantras. I'm good, and again, I'm staying in my lane. They've got this, right? And that's their expertise and not mine. And so, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great advice. I think do trust when you need to trust and
Mhm.
learn what you can learn and listen to your body and listen to your instincts too. And it's the best you
Exactly.
can do. It's the best we can do. So
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. So this has been fun.
Yes.
I would love for you to tell our listeners where they can learn more about you and what are some of the things that you are offering to folks out there, because I know you have ways people can work with you that might be really beneficial. So
Sure. Well, thank you so much. So I thrive on connectedness. And so I think the best way to reach me is probably LinkedIn. So I connect with absolutely everyone who wants to connect. And so that's by far the best way. I mean, certainly social media is fine, but I think LinkedIn is the best way. So I'm the CEO of Pen Crown Publishing, right, and McDermott Leadership. McDermott Leadership is really kind of the coaching arm, but Pen Crown Publishing is where we publish the collaborative books and all the solo books for authors and things like that. And that's where we support others in sharing their message with the world with high impact so they can leave the legacy they want to leave in the world, right? We have great stories and great books coming out, which I know that you'll share with your viewers too, so I don't need to spend time there. And it's just been such a pleasure. So for me, if anyone wants to connect with me for anything, I spend time with them. So it's, I'll spend 30 minutes with you talking about your hopes, your dreams, your desires, how you want to leave a legacy. So just book time with me and I'd be happy to connect.
oh my gosh, that's generous. That's so generous. And your books, are you looking for um stories for those books as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're thematic, right? So we have life-changing leadership, for example, and that's for military leaders and former military leaders. We also have a book called High Altitude Leadership, and that's for pilots and former pilots.
Wow.
One of the books that we have is called Unforgettable Guests. My sister actually owns, an inn at Palm Springs, and so one of the things that happened with hospitality during COVID was, pretty difficult, right? And so in looking at the different industries and stuff like that, there are a lot of amazing stories that, can be shared and messages and things like that. And so, so that book is for hospitality and really to share messages like that. And so, there's a book called Shift, for leaders to share stories on purpose and vision and so they're very thematic, and so my hope and desire is for people to want to share their messages and we'll support them. Our platform is pretty specific, right? So
Mhm.
I help folks who want to share their messages. I help them one-on-one as well, and because it's not just about becoming a best-selling published author for us, it's about the legacy piece, right? So
Mhm.
what do you want to leave in the world?
Reminds me a little bit of the chicken soup with
Oh,
the story.
Oh,
a little bit of that. But yeah, I love that you are, and as a marketing person as well, they always say, be really specific about who your target audience is. And I mean, you're very specific with military folks, with pilots, with, specific kind of leaders in hospitality. I love it. I love that it's very specific. So if anybody's listening, reach out to Allie and get your story out there if you fit into one of those categories. I think that's fun, and look forward to reading some of those. So yeah.
I think one maybe difference too is we partner with nonprofit organizations too. So our authors don't get royalties from our collaborative books. We actually partner with nonprofit organizations, and they get the royalties from the book. And then we also help support them on their journey. So for some of them, they want more publicity around, a particular event or their mission or, whatever's going on with them. And so that's also a huge difference, I think, too.
That's cool. That's why nonprofits always need help, and there's so many good ones out there. So
exactly.
So thank you for that. Any parting words you want to leave with the audience today?
So for me, again, age is chronological, right? So you are what you believe, and you can do absolutely anything you want to do in this world. So please just know that any limitations that you can think of are ones you've put on yourself. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, Allie, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for tuning in to Reinvention Ready today. I hope you learned a lot and enjoyed listening to Allie as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy hearing conversations like this, so that we can record more and keep sharing these great guests. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Reinvention Ready. I'm Janie Genosis. Go out and make the rest of your life your best life.